Google's first foray into gaming has arrived in the form of Stadia, and even before it's released, it has proven to be one of the most divisive platform launches I can think of. Stadia is the world's first fully digital console and the first major gaming service to be made available to the public. Services like OnLive and Gaikai have come before, but Stadia is the first service of this type to run custom hardware built with this in mind. You can play Stadia in 3 ways, at least right now. Like this, and finally like this. That last one is a bit tricky. Playing Stadia on your mobile phone requires you meet a very specific set of requirements. You have to have a Google Pixel phone, and you have to wire the Stadia controller directly to the phone via a USB-C cable, or you can use an Xbox or PS4 controller via Bluetooth. If you picked up the Founders Edition and have a Pixel, you still won't have the required cable or mount for the Stadia controller. Those are both available for purchase separately. Google says support for more phones and tablets is coming soon, but there isn't an exact date. So what does the Founders Edition, which is what you have to pick up to play before February 2020, get you? In the box, you get a Chromecast Ultra, which has special firmware on it for using Stadia on your TV. You have to use this special Chromecast Ultra to play for the time being, as Google has said an update for existing Chromecasts won't be available until later in the year. You also get the Stadia controller, which is required for TV play, along with 3 months of Stadia Pro, Stadia's paid subscription which gives you 1 free game a month, along with the ability to stream games in 4K resolution and discounts on some other titles. After those 3 months, Stadia Pro will cost $10 a month. The free tier of Stadia, called Stadia Base, won't release until February 2020, meaning only Pro subscribers can access Stadia at all until then. With that said, what else do you need to play Stadia? A solid, decent internet connection is all that's left. But what is a decent internet connection? Google recommends a minimum of 10 megabits per second if you want to play Stadia in 720p, which is a lower resolution than that offered on most modern consoles. For reference, 720p is the same resolution as the Switch's screen. If you want to play in 1080p, you'll need to double your speed to 20 megabits per second, and if you want the best possible quality, which is another way of saying 4K, Google says you'll need at least a 35 megabit per second connection. In my testing, Google's recommendations appear to be accurate. I have a gigabit connection at home, which is a little bit more than 25 times the recommended 4K speed for Stadia, so I decided to do some experimentation. First, I dropped it to the best recommended bandwidth of 35 megabits per second, and I found Stadia worked just as well at that speed as it did with full access to my internet connection. From there, I lowered it to 20 and then to 10, and Stadia continued to work without any noticeable degradation of quality. Once I dropped below 10, I began to experience issues with the image skipping and stuttering, and by the time I reached 1 megabit, Stadia was still delivering frames, but it was almost unplayable. I was hoping to test this further by playing Stadia on my Pixel over LTE, but the app doesn't allow you to do that. If you aren't on Wi-Fi, the app will pop up a message that you can't play until you connect. Since most LTE connections are much faster than Stadia's minimum requirements, I was confused as to why they'd choose to limit your ability to play your games anywhere like this. I tested Stadia out on public Wi-Fi at a nearby Starbucks, but it was too slow for me to play. But if I'm being honest with myself, the odds of me taking my controller, mount, and USB-C cable out of the house with me to game are slim. If I want to game offline, I'm much more likely to throw my Switch Lite in my bag than my entire Stadia setup. Speaking of the controller, it feels good to hold. It's about the same size as the Xbox One controller, but its layout feels more like that of the DualShock 4. The end result is something that doesn't quite feel as good as the Xbox One or Switch Pro controllers, but doesn't feel bad either. I prefer the flatness of the Stadia controller's buttons to those on the Xbox, and the analog sticks feel great, providing smooth movement with a level of resistance similar to that on the Xbox One and Switch Pro controllers, which in my opinion are as good as it gets. I also love the built-in batteries and USB-C charging port, especially since it means I can charge my Stadia controller using the same cables I have lying around for my Switch stuff. The controller also has the full complement of buttons I've come to expect from a modern gaming pad, as well as a dedicated button for Google's voice assistant and Rumble, though I haven't felt it go off in any of the games I tested. It also has a dedicated capture button similar to the one found on the Switch, with a short press snapping a screen capture and a long press grabbing a 30-second video. Interacting with those captures is where one of Stadia's first and most obvious quirks appears. Captures don't currently work when you're playing on your phone at all, but they do in TV mode or on a computer. To view those captures, you need to find them in the mobile app, and once you're there, there's no option to share them. You can only delete them, which makes me wonder, why not debut this feature when it's ready to be used the way it's intended? I can't imagine anyone wants clips or screenshots they can't share on social media or at least send to friends within Stadia. You can add friends in any of Stadia's modes, but party chat is limited to TV mode and when playing in a Chrome browser. If you're in the mobile app, you'll have to wait a while. This asymmetrical approach to features is one of Stadia's defining traits. If you want to purchase a game, you can only do that in the mobile app. Want to change your streaming video quality? You can only do that in the mobile app. HDR? Mobile app only. Want to add someone to your family group? You'll need to go to families.google.com in a browser to do that. And once you've added a family member, you can't share your games with them. Yet. All of those features I mentioned are set to be available across all of Stadia's different versions at some point, though we don't have specific information on when, meaning for the majority of people, TV mode is going to be the way to play Stadia, and that makes sense when you consider the pricing model. Stadia is basically a traditional console minus the physical hardware. You have a controller, you sit down, and you play. But how is it? Playing games on Stadia feels really good, actually. I expected there to be noticeable latency between button presses and on-screen action, but there wasn't that I noticed. In fact, at times it was easy to forget that this controller wasn't interacting directly with a piece of hardware in my home. Instead, it was connected to a server in a data center miles and miles away. During the review period, I was able to play 7 of Stadia's 22 launch titles: Red Dead Redemption 2, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Mortal Kombat 11, Just Dance 2020, Kine, Destiny 2, and Guilt, Stadia's only exclusive game. Across each of these games, I didn't notice any perceptible amounts of lag. In Mortal Kombat, I was able to fight competently and never felt hamstrung by my connection to Google servers. Lining up headshots in Destiny or chasing down bandits in Red Dead felt no different than when I did the same on my Xbox or PS4 at home. Whatever Google has done to mitigate the increased travel time between my home connection and their servers, they've done it well. It is worth noting, however, that I'm playing Stadia in a barely populated environment. Just a handful of reviewers are connecting to the service, and I don't know yet how Stadia will perform when Google opens it to the masses, but for now, I'm impressed. Even in 4K, I noticed no hitching and was able to get a consistent 60 frames per second out of games that supported it. There is, however, a visual trade-off. As I played multi-platform games on Stadia, I noticed they look softer overall than their counterparts on physical hardware. Games overall look blurrier on Stadia, but not enough to be distracting. Oftentimes while playing, I wouldn't notice, but during cutscenes in games like Red Dead Redemption 2, the results were easier to spot. Other games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider looked very close to the local hardware, enough to the point that even side-by-side differences can sometimes be hard to notice. This isn't really surprising though, and isn't something I'd consider a knock against Stadia. I'd liken the differences I spotted to that of watching a movie on Blu-ray versus streaming it at the same resolution on a video streaming service. To get the video to you without lag, it's often compressed, which results in a slight degradation of quality. If you haven't played these games extensively on competing platforms, the subtle drop in image fidelity is unlikely to bother you. Switching between screens is also possible in case you need to give up the TV in the middle of a session. I really enjoyed making use of this feature too. If you're playing on the TV, you can turn your controller off, then connect to whatever screen you want to play on. In my case, I tested moving from TV to my phone, then to my computer, and each time was practically seamless. In just a few seconds, my existing session would pop up on the new device and I'd pick up right where I left off. It wasn't quite the same instant gratification as popping my Switch off its dock and walking away with it, but it was pretty close. And speaking of instant gratification, my absolute favorite thing about Stadia is the complete elimination of download, installation, and update times. From the second you add a game to your account, it's ready to go. It took me an hour to install Red Dead Redemption 2 on my Xbox One from the disc and get it up to date, but I was playing it on Stadia in seconds. Load times are also dramatically reduced in multi-platform games on Stadia. I'm curious to see how Stadia's load times will stack up against the upcoming next generation of consoles, but for now it wins hands down. We also have to talk about what isn't in Stadia yet. When Stadia was first announced, Google showed off a ton of features that would differentiate it from its competitors. Things like crowd play, which would allow players to join in games with their favorite streamers, or Stream Connect, which would allow you to play split screen with online players. These features and a whole bunch more aren't part of Stadia's launch. Even achievements, which Google says are recording in the background, won't be available at launch. These missing features are easily the most compelling parts of Stadia, and it's truly disappointing to know I'll have to wait for them to be available. So, where does this leave Stadia right now? In a word, unfinished. And that's also how I have to mark this review. This review is in progress and will be for a while to come. For now, I like Stadia. Its features may be inconsistently applied across its various modes of play, and some of the most exciting things about it are still missing in action, but when I'm playing it, it's difficult not to marvel at what I'm experiencing, which is essentially gaming with an imperceptible amount of lag over the internet. Sure, video quality is somewhat compromised, but not to the point that it impacts the quality of the games on the platform in any meaningful way. I won't be able to give a final review on Stadia until weeks or even months after its launch. Of its 22 games, only one is exclusive to the platform. Unfortunately, Guilt is more Blinks the Cat than Mario 64. Most of those other 21 titles don't have any Stadia-specific functionality either. Only time will tell how the market will react to Stadia. Google has earned something of a reputation for abruptly shutting down services, leading to fears among the community that their paid-for Stadia libraries will disappear should Google shutter the platform. These complaints feel reminiscent of those made when digital games started gaining popularity a decade ago, which now outpace physical game sales by nearly 70%. What's more likely to challenge Stadia is good old-fashioned competition. Microsoft's streaming service xCloud looms on the horizon and is currently in testing. Where Google is taking a more traditional console business model and putting it in the cloud, Microsoft appears to be trying to build the Netflix of games by offering a subscription plan that includes access to a large library. More importantly, I'll need to see how Stadia performs when it's fully populated. Any online game or streaming service can impress when only a few people are using it, but as the user base grows, Stadia's ability to perform under pressure will make or break the platform. If Google can continue to build on the foundation they've created here while keeping Stadia performant and add the features they've promised in a timely fashion, they could become a major player in the games industry, even if they haven't yet put their best foot forward. That wraps it up for this early access review of Google Stadia. As always, thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe to GameXplain for much more on Stadia and all other things gaming as well. Make sure to ring that notification bell to be the first to know when we deliver our first post-launch update on Stadia, and I'll see you next time.